Imagine living in a world where everyone else could describe your face, but you could never truly see it for yourself. That was normal for most of human history, and when the mirror finally became clear, it did not just change beauty, it changed the human mind. Imagine living your whole life without ever truly seeing your own face. Not in a photograph, not in a clean piece of glass, not even for one quiet second in the morning. You might catch a shape in dark water, a trembling outline, a pale ghost made of light, but the moment the wind touched the surface, that face would break apart again. For most of human history, this was simply normal. Our ancestors knew the faces of others far better than their own. They could study a mother's eyes, a hunter's scar, the fear on a stranger's face. But when it came to their own reflection, they lived inside a kind of mystery. Stay with me here. What does it do to the mind when your own face is unknown to you? Perhaps identity felt softer then, less fixed, less personal. You knew who you were through your tribe, your family, your work, your place in the land. You were not a face to be managed. You were a role, a presence, a voice in the dark. And yet somewhere inside that ancient human mind, there must have been curiosity, a quiet hunger. What do I look like when I laugh? What do others see when they look at me? Am I as strong, as strange, as beautiful, as damaged as they say? Without a mirror, the self was something you had to imagine. And imagination can be both gentle and cruel. If someone called you wise, perhaps you pictured a calm and noble face. If someone called you ugly, perhaps you carried a wound you could never confirm for yourself. Your image lived in the words of other people, in their praise, in their judgment, in their silence. Keep this in your mind, my friends. Before mirrors became clear, identity was partly a rumor. Now let us try something together. Close your eyes for a moment, and in your mind, try to draw your own face. Not the version from photos, not the one from this morning, just from memory alone. Can you see the exact distance between your eyes? The shape of your mouth when it rests? The way your face looks when no one is watching? It is harder than it seems. Even today, with mirrors everywhere, your own face is still strangely elusive. You know it, and yet you do not fully know it. And that ancient uncertainty, that soft blur between who you are and what you see, would not last forever. Because soon human beings would begin trapping their reflections in metal, and that changed everything. The first mirrors were not magical. They were heavy, cold, imperfect. But to the people who held them, they must have felt almost supernatural. As human civilization grew more complex, people began shaping metal not only into weapons and tools, but into objects of beauty. In places like ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, and later Greece and Rome, artisans polished bronze and copper until the surface could catch a human face. Not perfectly, of course. These early mirrors did not offer a sharp reflection. They gave back a softened version of the self, a dim face, a little blurred, a little distorted. But still, it was enough to change something deep inside the human mind. For the first time, you could hold your own image in your hands. Think about that. A king could study his expression before appearing in court. A noblewoman could adjust her hair, her jewelry, the paint around her eyes. A priest could prepare a sacred face for ritual. The mirror was no longer just a surface. It became part of identity, performance, even power. And yet these mirrors were never simple objects. They were expensive, rare, often beautiful in themselves, with carved handles, decorated backs, and the quiet glow of metal. Owning one meant status. It meant wealth. It meant you had enough comfort in life to think not only about survival, but about appearance. This is where beauty begins to change. Before, the face belonged mostly to the eyes of others. Now, slowly, it began to belong to the self. You could compare, Correct. Observe. You could wonder not only how others saw you, but how you wish to be seen. And from that small shift came something larger. Vanity, yes, but also self-construction. The mirror gave people a new habit, to pause and inspect themselves, to treat the face as something that could be shaped, improved, and controlled. It was still blurry, still limited, but the seed had been planted. Hold that thought, because history was moving towards something far more powerful than polished bronze. A clearer mirror, a more dangerous reflection. And on a guarded island in Venice, hidden behind smoke, fire, and secrecy, men would risk everything to create it. But a blurry reflection was never enough. Once human beings discovered that they could see themselves, they wanted more. More detail, more control, a sharper face staring back at them from the surface. And that desire led to one of the strangest chapters in the history of beauty. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, the city of Venice became famous for luxury, trade, and glass. But the most precious work did not happen in the busy heart of the city. It happened on Murano, a nearby island where master glassmakers lived and worked under watch. The island was beautiful, and it was dangerous. Officially, the glassmakers were moved there because their furnaces could start fires in Venice. But that was only part of the story. Murano also became a kind of golden prison. The craftsmen who knew how to make the finest glass were valuable to the state. Their skill meant money, prestige, and power. So they were protected and controlled. The dream was simple, at least in theory, to make a mirror that was not dim like bronze, not broken like water, but clear enough to return the face with terrifying honesty. To do this, Venetian artisans developed extraordinary methods. They learned how to create smoother glass, how to polish it, and how to back it with reflective materials so that the image became brighter and more precise. The result was astonishing. For the first time, the human face came back almost whole, not as rumor, not as suggestion, but as evidence. Imagine the shock of that moment. To stand before a clear mirror after centuries of blur must have felt like meeting a stranger who had secretly been living inside you all along. Every feature became more real, every flaw, every expression, every sign of age, pride, fear, vanity. And now, stay with me. Here is the darker twist. This knowledge was guarded like a weapon. Venice understood that clear mirrors were not just decorative objects. They were luxury technology. Whoever controlled them controlled one of the most desired products in Europe. And so the secrets of Murano were heavily protected. Skilled craftsmen were discouraged from leaving. Spies watched for stolen techniques. And in some accounts, revealing the mirror-making secrets could be punished by death. Think about that for a moment. A person could die for teaching the world how to see itself more clearly. That is the pattern we often miss in history. We think of mirrors as harmless objects, resting quietly in bedrooms and hallways. But once they were bound to secrecy, politics, wealth, and fear. And the strange thing is this: the clearer the mirror became, the less simple the human self would feel. Because once people could truly study their own faces, they would begin to study something else as well, their inner lives, and that is where the story turns. Something quiet and profound began to happen when mirrors became clear. People did not just look at themselves, they began to think about themselves in a new way. Before this, identity was often tied to family, religion, duty, and social place. You were a son, a mother, a soldier, a servant, a believer. The self existed, of course, but it was not always treated as a private world to be examined closely. Then the mirror entered daily life with a new kind of precision, and slowly the human mind turned inward. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and searched your own face for meaning? Not just beauty, meaning. Do I look tired? Do I look strong? Do I look like the person I hope to become? This habit, so normal to us now, was once revolutionary. During the Renaissance, Europe saw an explosion of self-portraits, fashion, personal style, and individual ambition. Artists painted their own faces with intense care. Wealthy people commissioned portraits not only to record their existence, but to shape it. A face was becoming a statement, a public identity, a design version of the self. And the mirror was quietly training the mind for this transformation. It invited repetition. Look, adjust, compare, improve, look again. For the first time, many people could study the small theater of their own expressions. They could see embarrassment appear, pride harden, sadness settle under the eyes. The face was no longer just what others saw. It became a private text, something to read and interpret. This created beauty, yes, but it also created pressure. Because once you can inspect yourself clearly, you can begin to judge yourself endlessly. And that is the shadow growing beneath the Renaissance light. The mirror helped awaken self-awareness, which can be a beautiful thing. Self-awareness allows reflection, responsibility, growth. It helps us ask who we are and who we want to become. But the same mirror also fed vanity, insecurity, and self-obsession. It taught people to perform themselves, to manage their image, to become both the actor and the audience. Keep this in your mind. A clear mirror does not simply show a face. It creates a new relationship between the mind and the self. And once that relationship begins, it does not stay inside palaces and painting studios. It spreads outward through culture, into manners, into romance, into status, into the secret fear that maybe who you are is not enough unless it can be seen, admired, and confirmed. That is why the mirror changed more than appearance. It changed consciousness. And if that sounds dramatic, stay with me, because the next step in this story is even more familiar, and perhaps even more dangerous. The mirror did not disappear. It multiplied, and now it travels in our pockets. And now the mirror leaves the wall. It enters your hand. For most of history, a reflection was rare. Then it became luxurious, then ordinary. And now in the modern world, it is almost impossible to escape. We carry reflective surfaces everywhere. Bathroom mirrors, shop windows, elevator doors, black phone screens, front-facing cameras. The mirror is no longer a place we visit. It is an environment we live inside. This changes the mind in ways that are easy to miss. Ancient people may have wondered what their faces look like. We, by contrast, can check at any moment. We can correct, retake, delete, filter, compare. We do not just see ourselves. We manage ourselves again and again throughout the day. And here is the unsettling question. How many times did you check your reflection today? Not only in a mirror, in your phone camera, in a message preview, in a dark screen before it lit up, in a photo you took, then examined, then judged. Just pause with that for a second, because this is not only about vanity, it is about attention. Every reflection asks a quiet question: how am I appearing? And over time, that question can slowly replace a deeper one. How am I actually living? That is the modern echo of the ancient mirror. The tools have changed, the speed has changed, the sharpness has changed, but the psychological pattern is strangely familiar. We still search outside ourselves for confirmation. We still let the visible self compete with the invisible self. We still confuse image with identity. Only now the pressure is constant. A smartphone camera is not just a mirror. It is a mirror connected to judgment, memory, performance. and sometimes the eyes of thousands of strangers. The old bronze mirror asked, "How do I look?" The digital mirror adds another layer. How will this version of me be received? And that can become exhausting. You begin to curate your face, your mood, your life. You become careful not only about being, but about being seen. And when that habit grows too strong, something inside the person can start to thin out. The outer image becomes polished while the inner voice becomes faint. Remember this feeling, because the story of the mirror was never only about glass or metal or beauty. It was always leading here, to a moment where human beings can see themselves more clearly than ever before, and yet still feel uncertain about who they are. So the final question is no longer historical, it is personal. If the outer reflection can never fully satisfy us, where should we look next? So after all this history, all this glass, all this longing, we arrive at a quieter truth. A mirror can show your face. It cannot show your direction. It can reflect your skin, your eyes, the tiredness you carry, the mood you wear for the world. But it cannot tell you what matters most to you. It cannot tell you whether you are moving toward a life that feels honest. And it cannot tell you which desires are truly yours, and which ones were planted there by noise, pressure, and comparison. That is why, my friends, we must learn to look inward, not only outward, because the most important reflection in your life may not appear in glass at all. It may appear in stillness, in honesty, in a page of writing no one else will ever see. Let us make this simple. If the mirror trains you to ask, "How do I appear?" then journaling can train you to ask, "What do I actually want?" And that question can clear the mind in a powerful way. Here is the system. At the end of the day, sit down for just a few quiet minutes. Take a notebook or a blank page on a screen and write 3 things. First, what pulled my attention today? Write down what dominated your mind. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was a message, a memory, or a small moment you cannot stop replaying. This helps you see where your mental energy is really going. Second, what did I feel beneath the surface? Not the polite answer, the true one: irritated, lonely, hopeful, jealous, calm, ashamed, grateful. When feelings remain unnamed, they control us from the dark. When we name them, they become easier to understand. Third, what matters most tomorrow? Only 1 or 2 things. Not a long list, not a performance, just the clearest priorities. This step turns reflection into direction. That is the system: attention, emotion, direction, simple but powerful. Keep this in your mind. For thousands of years, human beings searched for better mirrors, clearer surfaces, sharper reflections. But clarity does not come only from seeing the face more clearly. Sometimes clarity begins when we stop staring outward for answers and begin listening inward instead. So tonight, when you see your reflection, remember this strange journey. From dark water to bronze to Venetian glass to the glowing screen in your hand. The mirror has always shown us something, but the deeper question has never changed. Not what do I look like, but who am I becoming? And if this story stayed with you, take 1 quiet minute tonight and write those 3 lines for yourself. What pulled your attention? What you felt beneath the surface? And what matters most tomorrow? And if you enjoy these calm English stories, stay close, my friends. There is always another journey waiting for us in the dark.